and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason. I'm a veteran Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or military hero from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour. Except this week, we're doing something a little different. And on behalf of everybody listening, Jason, thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Everyone's thinking it, so I'm saying it.
Well, I'm going to say Happy Veterans Day to all of the United States Armed Service veteran members. Oh, man. Oh, boy. I screwed that up. All the Armed Service veterans, current serving members, wounded warriors, anybody that has had a family member that has served in the military. Happy Veterans Day, because we were releasing this episode the week of Veterans Day in 2020. And if you're listening to this in the far future or a couple weeks down the road,
still happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Remembrance Day if you are a Commonwealth country.
And we're calling this episode Super Soldiers because not only does that tie into a certain book written by a certain someone, that's me, but, you know, we do think that all service members are super soldiers, and this is also the perfect way to announce and talk a little bit about that we've announced in a couple of other places, but to give you the full details of the 6th annual Jawiin charity drive for service members. We've been doing this for 6 years, and if you don't know what this is, then you're either a new listener,
welcome,
or maybe you're an amnesiac like that movie Memento.
I was gonna be like every soap opera ever.
So basically, for the last 6 years, with the amazing help of Ashley Victoria Robinson, I have been teaming up with Operation Gratitude, and we'll explain who they are in a minute, to raise money or to gather comic books and supplies for service members across the world, wounded veterans, wounded warriors in hospitals, and their families back home. Now, Ashley, if they don't know what Operation Gratitude is, what is Operation Gratitude?
Operation Gratitude is a completely amazing organization. It is a charity. It's a 501c3 charity, real grown-up charity that puts together care packages and supply packages for, as you said, service members, wounded warriors, and their families. And they are always open to donations, whether that be monetary, whether that be in goods. And they were also always open for donations of time. Even in a pandemic, they can still use a lot of help. They're an organization that you and I have been fond of for a really, really long time, and that we have been able to help through our efforts with the drive.
Yes, and because of complications with various different stuff of 2020.
You know.
Including the sad passing of Sean Connery, which I think affects this. But we are taking the Jawiin charity drive for service members virtual. So this year, we are no longer asking for you to send in your supplies. This year is going to be a one-day, free, live, 5-hour virtual event on Saturday, November 14th from 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There will be 5 panels. We have some special guests. We have celebrities. We have comic creators. It'll be imagine like the old Jerry Lewis telethon. We're going to be giving you 5 hours of geeky, fun content, all in the goal of raising $5,000 for Operation Gratitude to give. We did the math. That's 333 care packages.
Yep.
And we hope to blow through that goal. But come join us that day. Bookmark your calendars. Set that reminder. Tell your mama. All of that right now. I'm really excited about this. This is something that we've wanted to do a long time. Over the last 5 years, we've sent over 145,000 comic books to service members. And this year, it just seemed right to make this virtual because we've seen many other virtual conventions do amazing and astounding jobs. New York Comic Con was virtual. It just seemed like the right way to do this.
And last year we were able to do a live event, and we had thought about
at Collector's Paradise in Los Angeles.
Hats off to them. And we had thought about doing that again this year and pairing it with a digital option. And so this has been something that we've been hoping to do for a long time, and this honestly just presented us a great reason to do it now.
Yes. So you want to make sure you mark that date. You can watch the live stream 2 places, youtube.com/Jawiin. That's Jawiin. That's my personal YouTube channel. You all know it. The other place is we made a website that just basically gives you all the information about the drive, and that is CharityDriveForServiceMembers.com. So the live stream will be in both those places. Very easy to watch. And we're only counting the money towards the drive for the charity drive this year during that live stream.
Yeah.
You can donate to Operation Gratitude anytime. Now, before we get to the special guests and announce all that stuff, first question I know we're going to get, everybody's going to be like, hey, can I send in my comic books?
And the answer to that is, of course, you can send in your comic books. Operation Gratitude takes goods and donations. They take monetary donations. Again, they take donations of your time all year long, 360, 24/7, all of that. 52, how many more numbers can I throw out to spend a year? They take it all the time. It's just this year we are not going to be counting them. We are switching our metric to a monetary system because that's going to be a little bit easier for many reasons.
And also it just makes sure that we follow all these safe and social distances, protocols.
Exactly.
If you want to learn any of that, go to operationgratitude.com. If you do have comic books, you can go ahead and send them in. If you have comic books and you live in the Los Angeles area, Collector's Paradise, we have 3 locations. You can find their addresses on charitydriveforservicemembers.com. They will be collecting comic books that they will take to Operation Gratitude. Go to all 3 of the Collector's Paradise locations in Los Angeles. There's one in Pasadena, there's one in NoHo, and there's one in Winnetka. All right, so we have some big people.
We do.
We have some big people.
We have some returning someones, and then we have someone that we have been hoping to partner with for a really long time.
Yep. So this is the reason why you should show up on Saturday, November 14th for this charity live stream and watch, because we unfortunately, at the time of this recording this podcast, cannot announce our main guest. And that is the reason why, is because there is a bigger announcement about him coming out in another place. But he is somebody we've been trying to get on Geek History Lesson for a very long time, somebody that we've been fans of for a very long time, somebody that who has had an astounding career in film, television, and comic books.
And podcasting.
And I can only give you a clue who this person is. They're usually very silent. But sometimes they hang around people that say snoochie boochies. But we can announce a bunch of our other guests.
Heck
I know,
yeah.
that's very exciting, right? Isn't that very exciting? You're just immediately like, oh my God, who is that? Well, we'll be sharing the official announcement in the GHL podcast.
Very soon.
So Ashley, who are some of the people that are going to be joining us on November 14th from 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a 5-hour virtual show? Do we want to give the times of everybody? Or?
Yeah, we can give the times.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. So who is the first panel of the day at 12 p.m.?
Thank you for clarifying
Sorry.
that. So the first panel of the day is going to be, again, like Jason said, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. And we are opening with some comic book legends who have been on the show before.
That's right.
And that is Mr. Tom King, Mr. Mitch Garrett, and Mr. Doc Shaner.
The team of Strange Avengers.
Woo! Including another veteran in Mr. Tom King.
Mr. Tom King is not a veteran. Mr. Tom King is a CIA agent. Technically different.
My apologies. You are correct.
He did serve in Iraq, but not technically a veteran. I have much respect for him.
Absolutely fair. Thank you. You and him actually were in sort of the same place at the same time.
We were in the same place at the same time.
But did not know each other.
Yeah.
But yes, so he was over there as well. Obviously, that shows through in Tom's work with Mitch on Sheriff of Babylon.
We should just make that clear. Yeah, Tom was deployed as a CIA agent to Iraq around 2004 and early 2005. I was deployed as an Army soldier to Operation Iraqi Freedom from the entire year of 2005. So there was a point where I was in Iraq around Baghdad, and he was actually in Baghdad.
That's wild to think about.
Yeah.
So they are going to come on, and we are going to open with them. We're going to talk all things comic book. I'm sure there'll be some Batman talk. There'll be some Strange Adventures talk. But if you are a long listener of the podcast, you've heard them on before, you know it's going to be a good time. And we wanted to start in true comic book fashions with some real badass guys.
Yes, and then the second panel at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time is going to involve Miss Ashley Victoria Robinson and possibly myself, probably myself.
It's really your prerogative.
Yeah. Talking to a wonderful woman, Susan Eisenberg, also a guest of GHL.
Previous guest.
And voice of Wonder Woman on the Justice League animated show. We're going to be talking to Wonder Woman for an entire hour and all this stuff like that. That's great. And then the third hour Ashley, at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time is going to be who?
So it is one previous guest and one new guest, two podcast luminaries who we are very, very excited to get a chance to bring into the same virtual room at the same virtual time. And that is going to be with Mr. Brian Ibbott of Coverville, The Morning Stream. You've heard him on the show before. And Mr. Tom Merritt, who you may know from such incredibly popular podcasts as the Daily Tech News Show, Sword and Laser, Current Geek. And one of them lives in the same state as us. One of them does not. I'm very, very excited to get both of them on at the same time. And Tom is also someone who we have been chasing down and hoping to get on the show for a while. So I'm very excited that he is lending his incredible talents to the show.
Tom is also a published author, so go check out his books over at amzn.to. He just did a sequel to Pilot X, which I'm really looking forward to reading. I cannot remember the name of it to save my life.
He also has
now.
really cute dogs, so hopefully they will show up. Mr. Brian Ibbott has a very cute cat, so there might be a lot of animals going on in the third hour of the Jawiin Charity Drive live stream.
And then the fourth hour is going to be a fun comic book style, superhero style trivia game with some of our favorite online and YouTube stars. We have asked Brian Tong of DC Daily and Applebite to join us, Emma Fife of The Download, Jay Washington, Chocolate Thunder himself of the Mad Titan podcast. You know him, you love him, is going to be joining, as along with DJ Woolridge of Only Stupid Answers. And we will all be going in a trivia contest. I have no idea what's going to be happening in trivia.
I'm writing it.
Because Ashley is writing the questions.
I'd love to add a little addendum to the guest list for that as well, because very, very lovely friend Christian Ruvakaba is engineering this for us. He's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Of the Wanger Show.
Of the Wanger Show. He is also going to be on the trivia panel. He's going to be showing up and showing his face if he hasn't passed out from stress by that point as well.
Yes.
So special love to Christian for all of his help, because he's been a big part of making this happen this year.
And we should also state that again, that like a lot of the heavy lifting of this goes to Christian and Ashley for making this thing. Ashley is a big coordinator of this, and you should definitely thank her online everywhere. And then the last panel is the big guess that I alluded to before. The other clue I will give you, and I gave this clue in another place, and I thought it would give it away. I will say that in a movie, he fought a Skywalker. Put that together.
I mean, I wouldn't know what that means.
Put that together. Put that together. You know, some might say...
You don't have to give it away.
Some might say that he might be behind the camera of Supergirl, and he might be behind the camera of Flash sometimes. Mm-hmm. But he is always a master of the universe.
That's true. He's also been on camera for one of those shows.
But he is a very special guest, and we'll be closing out the show with him. So that's why you need to join. But also, not only is all that, I know you're just like, oh my God, that's so much content. I'm definitely going to show up, and I'm definitely going to help the service members. And I'm like, oh, good for you.
We're also going to give you a little more than that.
Yeah, so we're going to do a thing. We're going to do this. We haven't decided whether we're going to do this for every panel or not. But most of the panels will be picking the highest donor of that panel, of that hour. And that high donor will be winning some amazing prizes, including some original art by some comic book legends. Dan Jurgens, you know him from Death of Superman, the creator of Booster Gold. He is drawing an original booster piece that during one of the panels we will be giving away to the highest donor. Cully Hamner of Black Lightning Year One and Detective Comics is also drawing a piece that will go to one of the high donors. And newly announced on X-Men, and you know him from the Teen Titans and Titans, Brett Booth of Wildstorm fame is also drawing a piece. Plus, I'll be giving out some signed copies of my book, Super Soldiers, A Salute to the Comic Book Heroes and Villains Who Fought for the Country. That book, of course, that is about the comic book heroes and the ties to my military service. So remember, the Jawiin Charity Drive for service members will be available to live stream on the official Charity Drive website, which is CharityDriveForServiceMembers.com and YouTube.com/Jawiin. And it will be happening on Saturday, November 14th from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Please just show up for the 5 minutes. Show up and give $5. Everybody can throw $5 towards. This podcast is about talking about fake fictional heroes. Mm-hmm. It's time to support real heroes. End your 2020 on a high note.
Heck yeah.
by helping the real heroes. We love talking about fake heroes, but like all these service members put their lives on the line every single day. And I will tell you, as a person who's been a service member, receiving a care package like Operation Gratitude sends out can change your life. It definitely changed mine. So 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, November 14th, the Jawiin Charity Drive for service members. 5 hours of awesome content, 5 hours to raise $5,000 with the help of you. I expect every one of you to show up. And if you don't, you're going to get detention.
Also, 100% of the proceeds are going to Operation Gratitude. It's not no 10%. It's not no 50%. 100% is going to Operation Gratitude. It never goes to us. We are not holding it. It is all going directly to the good guys doing the good work.
And the only way to donate is through the stream. That's it.
That's the only way that we'll be able to track it. You are, of course, always welcome to donate to Operation Gratitude directly.
Oh, yeah, please do.
But if you are coming for some of these dope prizes, which I know Jason and I are going to try very hard not to keep for ourselves, if you are coming to the stream, the only way for your donation to count towards our goal is if you donate through the stream.
I'm telling you right now, I am going to donate hard for that booster gold piece. So you best come prepared, son. I will fight. I will out donate anybody. I might get us to the goal just to get that piece.
Truly.
But please do that. It's a very good cause. And we're very also excited to look on the news sites very soon. The entertainment news sites, of course, for the big announcement on who our big final guest is. But I've dropped enough hints that I think
so.
I think you know who it is.
Also, I said this at the top, this is something that we have been trying to include in our efforts for a long time. So this is a pilot program in a lot of ways for what the drive is going to look like in 2021 and 2022 and moving forward. And the more successful this is, the bigger, more badass things we can do in the future.
Well, I think we can say it right here. I think let's just be upfront with the listeners here.
Sure.
We would love for the Jawiin Charity Drive for service members in 2021 and going further, that when we can all go out in public again and
safely,
be safely and we're all healthy again, we're all happy, that we could do an event or a concert or a comedy show or something like that, where some of these guests, it would be like watching a live podcast at a con. And your ticket is, used to donate to Operation Gratitude. And then we also do live auctions and stuff like that, and all kinds of things like that.
Greets. And we would love to turn this into a huge live to-do.
Yes, a huge live to-do thing. And it all depends on this year's Jawiin Charity Drive for service members. So I'm going to say it again because it's very important. 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on November 14th. The full schedule will be released very soon on the website, and go check that out. And the perfect final way we thought to end this episode called Super Soldiers is, again, I've talked about it several times. I have a book called Super Soldiers, Salute to the Comic Book Heroes and Villains Who Fought for Their Country. It is about my military career, and it is looking at all the comic book heroes that served in the military and how, whether or not I think they are good soldiers or not. A lot of people gave me great quotes for it. Brad Meltzer, Dan Aykroyd. It's been out for a couple of years, and I decided to read, for your inspiration and also as part of a Happy Veterans Day, one of my favorite chapters from that book, The War Machine, the James Rhodes chapter. Now, actually, you were the one that suggested to read that chapter because you said you thought it was one of my best chapters. And as a person who was my first editor on that book, why?
I think that chapter is one of your best chapters because of your love of that character. You did a really good job, and I know this because I know you personally, of picking characters that you were really passionate about and characters that maybe you were not as familiar with, like we do for the show. And I think you gave everyone a really fair shake and a really fair deal. But when you read or listen to you speaking and writing about Rhodey, you can tell that you love this character. And you are also, because Rhodey is a character of color, you are not a person of color. I think you do a really good job at breaking down the similarities and the differences between your experiences. And I also think the way it ties into you personally in this chapter is very moving.
Interesting.
So I think this chapter best exemplifies the thesis of super soldiers and what you were trying to achieve with it. And I think listeners of the podcast as well know how much you advocate for Rhodey and what an absolute crime it is that he doesn't have a movie.
Or a show.
Yeah, and I think this echoes that in a really nice way.
Well, thank you, Ashley. That's very sweet. And if you like what you hear, don't forget that you can pick up Super Soldiers on Amazon, everywhere books are sold, or you can find a signed, personalized copy direct from me at jasonenman.com/store. So let's listen to a little bit of myself reading my book, Super Soldiers. Here we go. Super Soldiers. Written and read by Jason Inman. First chapter, War Machine, the Armored Battle Buddy. Everyone in the world knows the phrase Batman and Robin. Sidekicks are usually underappreciated, just like the supporting casts in many comic book worlds. These supporting casts include characters who at first glance some would consider to be sidekicks. And in those stories, sidekicks are looked down upon as lesser heroes when measured against the deeds of their heroes/protagonists. However, these characters are the furthest thing from insignificant. These cast members stand by their heroes and support them in each of their battles, while at the same time not following their orders blindly. Characters like Lois Lane in Superman, Wong in Doctor Strange, and James Rhodes in Iron Man stand taller than their heroes and in many cases outshine them in every aspect. James Rhodey Rhodes first appeared in Iron Man number 118 in 1968. To Tony and the reader, he was simply a helicopter pilot. It wasn't until many issues later that we learned James's true origin story. He was not only a pilot, but an Air Force helicopter pilot. In another instance of Marvel comic retconning, Rhodey originally met Iron Man during the Vietnam War. Now, their rolling and constantly updating timeline has their fabled meeting happening now during the Afghanistan conflict. When Tony came across Rhodey in the steamy jungle, the billionaire philanthropist was clad in the very first Iron Man suit he ever designed. We'll not mention why Tony is also wearing a trench coat and hat on top of that said armor. That subject could fill another 300-page book. Rhodey was desperately trying to fix his helicopter to get back in the air when the newly minted Iron Man loudly lumbered through the trees. Rhodey did what any decently trained airman would do. He pointed his M16 at the monstrosity and fired. When the bullets had no effect on the Iron Man, Rhodey remarked, "Oh mama, looks like I stepped in the bad stuff this time." Iron Man assured Rhodey he would not harm him, but he needed the batteries from Rhodey's downed helicopter to recharge the suit. If he couldn't get a boost soon, the suit would fail, and Tony Stark's heart would stop. This was during the time in Tony Stark's career when he needed the Iron Man suit to survive. The two men barely had a moment to consider their next moves when a Viet Cong patrol attacked their position. The two were forced to unite against a common enemy. There's no quicker way to forge a bond than that. Iron Man saved Rhodey's life, which ultimately convinced James Rhodes to allow Iron Man to drain his helicopter's batteries. As a result, the helicopter was permanently down for the count. Not only that, but Rhodey's leg had been injured during the surprise attack. Determined to not leave behind the brave soldier who had helped him, Iron Man carried Rhodey on foot until they reached the American perimeter and safety. After being released from the hospital, Tony Stark appeared to Rhodey and thanked him for helping his Iron Man reach safety. He then offered Rhodey a job after the hostilities in Vietnam ended. Readers note, Iron Man kept his real identity secret from Rhodey and made him believe Iron Man was Tony's bodyguard. One can only imagine the conversations they must have had jaunting through the jungle, like, "Hey Iron Man, what movies do you like?" This was a ruse that Tony Stark perpetrated on several people in the comics over the years, not just Rhodey. This brief encounter proves Rhodey was ready to think outside the box. He wasn't and is not limited to the rules and standard procedures of the Air Force. Rhodey is willing to critically think about the situation and use the available means to accomplish his goal. You don't look a gift iron robot man in the mouth. After a series of other jobs, Rhodey left the military and finally accepted Stark's offer. He became Tony's personal pilot and aviation engineer. Many people like to put service members in a box, typecasting them, if you will. If you join the Air Force, then the only career fields for you after your service are flying jumbo jets for airlines or NASA. Rhodey took a job that was a little of both. If not for his acceptance of the strange, he would never have found himself working for a multi-billionaire superhero, a job which would eventually lead him to his own true destiny, becoming a superhero. When my time in the service was over, I considered many jobs connected to my old life. I had just come back from a year in Iraq, and many of the civilian contractors who staff bases in the combat zone are always looking for experienced former soldiers. Since you've already seen the combat theater up close, you know exactly what to expect. There would be no surprises. In retrospect, I can't imagine any full civilian non-veteran who would accept a job in a combat zone. No job pays that well. There is one employer whose pay is woefully poor, and that is the United States Armed Forces. Join any of the branches, and unless you quickly move up the ranks to captain or major, you're going to find your paycheck lacking. Now, there are plenty of other benefits that sometimes make up the difference when you are serving, but not many. Our fighting men and women are severely underpaid for the job we expect them to do. Civilian contractors in a combat zone, on the other hand, are paid handsomely. I remember asking the civilian who managed our fuel base on Talil Air Force Base, the post I was stationed at in Iraq, how much he made. He simply laughed and said, "It'll make your head spin, kid." It's the only reason I ever considered going back to the dusty lands of the Middle East, because maybe, just maybe, the pay would make it worth my time. I obviously never made that choice, and since I now sit here writing and reading this book, however, this exact choice was made by James Rhodes, and I like to think that his Stark paycheck was very handsome. It's a choice I think many combat veterans would also have made. Now, Rhodey is also a character who values loyalty. Perhaps it was his many years serving in the Air Force. Perhaps Rhodey always had a loyal bent. But this trait has come to define his relationship to Tony Stark. While many people in the world do not trust Tony, Rhodey always sticks by him. This essentially makes Tony his civilian battle buddy. That's a term for when you are partnered to another soldier in combat. It's your duty to look out for each other and ensure you both make it through the mission unscathed, no matter what. I believe this is Rhodey's mechanism for coping with civilian life and the strangeness of working for, and later with, Tony Stark. Think about it. Most days in the job at Stark Enterprises, the living laser or spy master will come crashing through your window. Then try to steal the newest technological invention built by your boss. Only by focusing on his loyalty to Tony, a person who gave him a shot, a friend who took a chance on him, can Rhodey deal with the insanity destined to occur in the same building as Iron Man's exploits. Several years later, Tony had been prepping and grooming Rhodey to take over Stark Enterprises, Tony's billion-dollar company. Tony had suffered nerve damage from extensive use of the various Iron Man suits and kept it secret. So, Tony faked his death. Because when you need to heal from nerve damage, it's best to fake your demise to all your friends and place yourself in suspended animation, of course. Needless to say, Rhodey suddenly found himself in charge. He had to take control of a giant company and protect its interests by suiting up in the new Iron Man suit called the Variable Threat Response Battlesuit. Rhodey even took Tony's place in the West Coast Avengers. This is the Avengers team that stops beach crimes while surfing near the Santa Monica Pier, a very different vibe from the regular Avengers team. These are situations Rhodey did not want to be a part of. However, he took responsibility and succeeded because of his loyalty to his dead friend. This is the crux of every decision Rhodey makes. How can he support his friend? How can he support his fellow service members? It's all through the act of giving to the other, giving to his best friend. Does this suggest there is a piece of Rhodey that will not be an airman ever? Yes, it does. It's so central to his core that without it, he wouldn't know what to do or how to act. This is value. This value is what Rhodey ingrained into himself over the course of his service. All service members change when we go through the gauntlet of serving our country. How much and how little depends on the person. For Rhodey, he holds tight to what he needs to survive. If someone were to betray him, it would not go well. It would lead to what many would call a "bye Felicia" scenario. When Tony finally rejoined the land of the living, Rhodey quit Stark Enterprises. These two men, who were best friends, didn't talk for several years after this incident. Can we really blame Rhodey? Rhodey stepped into a world he wanted no part of. He's a pilot. He likes to make avionics soar over the wind, not sit in boardrooms and put together reports on profit margins. Rhodey did it all for Tony, his battle buddy, who betrayed him on a very fundamental level. If you can't trust your battle buddy, your most loyal friend, then who can you trust? Tony gave Rhodey the variable threat response battle suit as compensation for his deception, saying the suit was always designed to be Rhodey's. Thus, Rhodey was finally on his own, a hero with no one to take orders from. He renamed the shiny silver and black armor War Machine, and even rejoined his old beach team, the West Coast Avengers. Yet this move did not last long, since Rhodey got into an argument with Iron Man, Tony, at an Avengers team meeting, which led him to leave the Avengers altogether. The wounds of Stark's betrayal had not healed. It's not hard to empathize with Rhodey in this instance. Loyalty is his most defining characteristic. His whole character in every story he appears in is about helping out Tony Stark. When it is robbed from Rhodey, what can he do? Luckily, James wasn't sitting on his hands the entire time he was a supporting character. He was subconsciously observing how a superhero works and figuring out ways to do it better. In fact, the War Machine armor is the perfect tool for James Rhodes. While the previous Iron Man suits have been designed for single battles and criminals, this is the first armor that was specifically designed for war. This is even the first armor in Iron Man history to include a giant Gatling gun on the shoulder. Repulsor beams aren't good enough for War Machine. He needs a gun that makes every criminal wet themselves in fear when they see the bullet capacity. This is a suit for a service member, not a billionaire. After years and years of fighting supervillains as War Machine, James Rhodes finally found a job that made sense for his time as a superhero and his time in the service. He was hired by the Office of National Emergency, to serve as the direct command officer and combat instructor for the Sentinel Squad 1 program. If you've ever read an X-Men comic, then you probably know what a Sentinel is. It's a big purple robot whose programming is to hunt, capture, and sometimes murder humans. Now, before you go on a rampage, Rhodey was not hired to kill mutants. Mutants, of course, being the humans born with powers in the Marvel Universe. Side point, one could write a whole book about the bigotry of the Marvel Universe. Why do they fear Kitty Pryde when Spider-Man lives in the exact same city? There's no way to tell them apart, but I digress. The mutant killing machines were reprogrammed and repurposed to protect and serve the United States after the recent drop in mutant population caused by the Marvel Comics event House of M. Not only was this a brilliant writing move on the part of Marvel Comics, but it was the perfect fit for Rhodey. After years of being a more gunned-up version of Iron Man on his own, Rhodey could rejoin the fold. This program could accomplish the same amount of good Iron Man could, but it folded into the rules and regulations of the military and the government. Plus, Rhodey gets to be at the top of the chain of command. For a man who had to put up with all the insane nonsense Tony Stark subjected him to, Rhodey would be looking for any semblance of structure. Many veterans, when they leave their units, are excited to join the civilian world. The freedom of choice in all matters of your life is very appealing. Some find they dislike the lack of structure outside the military. This leads them to rejoin their former service branch. James Rhodes found himself in a perfect position to make use of his expertise. Not only did he have prior service in the military, but no one in the world knew as much about cybernetics, mech tech, and being cramped inside a claustrophobic metal suit as him. From right out the gate, Rhodey made his suit inclusive, even allowing mutants to serve inside the Sentinel mechs. The team aspect was the primary goal. Every last member of your team is your brother, Rhodey announced to his teams. In a training exercise with the Sentinel squad, another recruit freaked out when she saw the amount of firepower being levied at the team. Scores of tanks and planes were bombarding one of Rhodey's Sentinels. Smoke and ash filled the air. At the end of the fight, it was not clear whether the Sentinel recruit had won or lost. Suddenly, 3 Sentinels stood in victory as Rhodey boasted to the recruit, "It was never about taking down a single Sentinel, but taking down a Sentinel team." The writer of Sentinel Squad 1 series, John Layman, impressed me. In this story, we see Rhodey building an entire military unit out of loyalty. The fact that Rhodey holds fast to that idea is powerful. It makes him a good man and a good leader. Finally, there is one more recent concept that affects not only James Rhodes, but many service members across the world through various and slightly more dramatic storylines. Rhodey was killed while in a fight with the Mad Titan Thanos. Remember him from Infinity War? Many months after his death, Rhodey was brought back to life, and the same procedure was also brought back his good friend and old boss, Tony Stark. Remember what I told you earlier about the impermanence of death in comic books? In Tony Stark Iron Man #2 in 2018, days after rejoining the land of the living, Rhodey experienced a nightmare full of references to classic issues of Iron Man. He saw himself burning up in the atmosphere when he stood in for Tony in the Iron Man armor. He saw himself becoming a half cyborg from a War Machine series that very honestly is better forgotten. Next, he saw the fatal blast from Thanos' head that had torn him apart, and he shot up in bed, covered in sweat, and screamed, "I can't stop dying in the damn suit." This, my friends, is a classic example of a character struggling with PTSD, better known as post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a mental disease that develops after a person suffers a traumatic event. It is a malady which has become more prevalent in recent years due to the number of war on terror veterans returning from combat with it. It's a disorder that is being seen more and more in media, and it makes complete sense for a superhero to struggle with it, especially a military superhero. Think about the cataclysms and cosmic disasters these people face on a daily basis. If one of the elder beings of the universe shows up in your backyard and tries to eat your home planet, I think you will probably experience some trauma too. Re-experiencing trauma through recollections of the event or flashbacks is one of the symptoms of PTSD. But Rhodey does the absolute wrong thing and suits up in the War Machine armor as soon as he can. Instead of seeking professional help, Rhodey puts himself back into the same danger situations that gave him said PTSD. Remember, James Rhodes is all about loyalty. When his friend Tony Stark asks for his help, Rhodey is there. From the very beginning, Rhodey can't stand being inside the suit, and once their superpowered fight with a bunch of villains begins, Rhodey starts to freak out. He quickly ejects from the suit, which gives Tony pause. He has never seen his strong support, his military friend, like this. However, Rhodey didn't leave his best friend hanging for long. He crawled inside this mobilized battle vehicle named the Manticore. It has a steering wheel and feels like flying an armored tank. Rhodey quickly warmed to it. It made him feel like a pilot again. It's a brilliant move to connect the character all the way back to the origin story where readers were first introduced to him. The heroes, of course, saved the day with all speed, and on their ride home, Tony asked Rhodey what happened to him. What was he struggling with? What was going on? "I can't be in suits anymore," Rhodey explained. "They're like coffins to me." Not only does his word choice evoke death, something Rhodey had recently experienced, but it doubles down on Rhodey's PTSD. Rhodey wanted nothing to do with his war machine chute in the middle of a combat situation, and he abandoned it. I can sympathize with Rhodey. While I didn't suffer death at the hands of a giant purple Marvel villain, I did spend almost a year in a combat zone. From January 2005 to December 2005, I was stationed in Iraq. Something that many civilians might not realize is that for every second you are in a combat zone, you are required to carry your weapon, usually an M16. This weapon becomes your second arm. Many people today would equate that feeling to their cell phone. The second it goes missing, it drives you mad. Not only does this weapon become a part of your life, but every decision you make is ordained by a standard set of rules. You may not drive off base without an armed convoy. If you do drive off base, your Kevlar helmet and flak jacket must be on at all times. Your weapon must be locked and loaded. All of these standard procedures add up and change your daily life in subtle ways. Think about completing these actions time and time again, day after day. When I returned home, I no longer had my weapon. I could drive my car down the street to wherever I wanted. I could clearly remember once in early 2006 freaking out over the freedom of being able to drive to Subway. This is by no means a chapter sponsored by Subway. This freedom of choice and loss of the standard daily routines was frightening and frankly overwhelming to me. It took several months for me to feel comfortable about being a normal civilian again. Admittedly, my thoughts and feelings took me nowhere near the severity of Rhodey's condition, but since his thoughts lined up with mine, I felt a kinship with his problems. James Rhodey Rhodes is not only a great man, but he's an astounding character. In fact, he was my introduction to the character of Iron Man. When I first bought comics featuring the Armored Avenger, Rhodey was the star. So I have a soft spot for him. Whether the writing choice was a conscious or not act, baking the character trait of loyalty into every aspect of Rhodey's life not only cements him as a hero, but also deeply connects him to his military career. When I started the research for this chapter, I didn't expect to discover more about Rhodey. For years, he's always been Iron Man in the black and white armor, the not as cool Iron Man who was in the military. However, writing this chapter has changed my mind. I respect him as an airman. I respect him as a character, and I respect him as a hero. We could ask for no better example of a military hero in comic books. When used correctly, as in a character like Rhodey, the traits of the military can strengthen and enhance dramatic storytelling. His loyalty to Tony is not a weakness, but a defining trait that should be celebrated. In fact, Tony Stark said it best. When talking about Rhodey, he once said, "You literally catch me when I fall. You're James Rhodes. That's what you do." If we could all have a battle buddy like Rhodey, all of our lives would be better. And if you want to read more or hear more of my book, Super Soldiers, you can find it on Amazon and wherever books are sold. You can also buy signed copies on my store at jasoninman.com/store. Don't forget, the Jawiin charity drive for service members will be happening November 14th. Please come join us in our goal to raise $5,000 for Operation Gratitude to send care packages to service members and wounded veterans in hospitals. We need your support, so don't forget, set your calendars for Saturday, November 14th, from noon to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening to this very special episode of Geek History Lesson. I'm Jason Inman, and class is dismissed.